This week you'll be learning about natural selection, which is one of the most important ideas in biology. I'm going to go through a real quick PowerPoint to explain some of the ideas. So natural selection was the idea of Charles Darwin, who lived in the 1800s. And he came up with this when he traveled on a ship and he looked at a whole bunch of different species of birds and plants as he traveled around around the world, but also the Galapagos Islands is where he really focused on it. So here's the main ideas of natural selection. The idea is that natural selection is going to affect populations, not individuals. And you start with the idea that all populations have genetic variation among the individuals. Genetic variations are caused by mutations, crossing over an independent assortment and meiosis and random fertilization. So sexual reproduction leads to variation. And genetic variations can be passed down through DNA from generation to generation. A genetic variation isn't good or bad on its own, but the environment selects which variation is better than another variation. So having white fur in a dark forest is not a good variation for camouflage. Having white fur in the snow is a great variation. The selective pressures are the things in the environment that are going to decide who survives and reproduces the best. So they could be competition among different members of a population. So who's the fastest to get their prey or who's the best at sniffing out food. It could be having predators and who can escape from the predators. It can be who can get the most food. It can be who is most attractive to the mates. So having limited number of mates creates a pressure. If you're an insect, a pesticide would be a pressure because that would be something that kills insects. An herbicide is a pressure on a plant. An antibiotic would be a pressure on bacteria. So pressures are what determines which variation is the best. The term fitness or biological fitness does not have to do with strength or speed. Fitness is the individuals in the population who have the most offspring or the most babies. So whoever has the most babies is considered to be the most fit because they're passing on their genes at a higher rate than the other individuals. So they are the ones that are considered to have the adaptation. Organisms with the best variation or adaptation survive and reproduce more often in the environment than organisms with variations that don't give the advantage. So most organisms produce, the organisms that are producing more offspring are going to survive and pass those on. Those offspring with the best adaptation will be able to pass on that adaptation to future generations by having their own offspring. So the idea is that the DNA gets passed on and passed on. Over time, and lots of time, the population will change to have more individuals in it with the adaptation than with other variations. This is because individuals with the best genetic variation survive and pass on their offspring. Individuals without it die. An individual cannot choose to adapt. You either have the adaptation in your DNA and survive, or you don't and you die. Evolution is this change in allele frequency in the population over time. Alleles are the options for a trait, like blue eyes or brown eyes, or dark skin or light skin, or curly hair or straight hair, or different versions of a gene. So the alleles are the options that have a phenotype, which is the expressed form of the trait. Frequency is how often it's found in a population, and allele frequency is how often that version of a trait is found in the population. So again, a reminder for the vocab, population is the members of a single species that live in the same area at the same time. Genetic variation is differences in DNA that create differences in what's seen, the phenotype, that's passed on to future generations. A selective pressure is what can change the environment. So here I have a whole bunch of bacteria, and like right now you have a lot of bacteria in your digestive system. If you're not having an antibiotic, then being antibiotic resistant isn't necessarily a good thing. So I have one resistant and all the rest are just normal. When I take an antibiotic, then all of these other ones die off and I'm left with the resistant and I'm left with one of the normal. These are going to reproduce, but more of the resistant ones are going to form in the population, and over time the population completely changes. So this is an example of evolution in bacteria. Biological fitness refers to the number of offspring that are produced by an individual. So this individual will be more fit than this individual because they have more offspring, which means that they're passing on their DNA at a quicker rate or a higher rate. And an adaptation is the variation that's the best for that environment. So if you look at this webbed foot, this would be great for swimming. It's great for water. but it's not a good one for land, whereas this would be a better adaptation for land. If I need to seize my prey like a hawk, this would be a better adaptation. These beaks and bills all have adaptations to get different types of food. And the best thing about evolution is the idea that the more differences, then these don't have to compete with each other for the same sources of food or the same place to live. Okay, so these can get food in the water where these are going to get food from land. Natural selection is the driving force of evolution, and populations are changing over time because individuals with the best variation survive and reproduce at a higher rate. Over time, the population will change. So here I have my first variation, and this is asexual reproduction. I'm producing these different options through mutations. This one just dies out. It's not a good option. And then these are continuing to reproduce. And over multiple generations, so these are generations, I see change because this is the best variation. So it's the adaptation. So that's the information you need to know for your work this week. You only actually have one graded assignment. So I'm going to have, by the way, right here, this is that slideshow if you want to come back to it to look at it. So this is on the, if you're looking at your module, we are in the module for May 26th through 29th. Everything's due by Sunday the 31st. I will offer 2 Zoom times. I'll offer Wednesday at 12 and Thursday at 2, and the links are right here. This was right on this page, and the slideshow that I am showed you is going to be right on this page. And then I'll just take you through what you're doing. So here's the slideshow if you want to look at it. So here's the ideas that you can kind of glance at. You have a little warm-up quiz. This is not for any points, but it's a practice quiz. Okay, so take that and see what you know. These resources, you've got videos. You've got 2 videos on variation and a reading on variation, and 2 videos on natural selection and a reading on natural selection. And then there's a TED Talk about variation in humans and about skin color, the science of skin color. And then, oops, I'm in the wrong one. I thought this was different. Sorry. Sorry about this. I am in the honors one, and I meant to be in the on-level one. For on-level, forgive me for this interruption, but I don't feel like redoing the whole beginning. You guys. So for you, you're starting here. And here is the slideshow. And here's the different objectives and what you're learning about. And then you have this warm-up quiz. And then on this resource page, there's information about variation and natural selection. Here is a slideshow that you can look at. It should open for you. So you're going to go through the slideshow. And then there is this is a practice quiz based on that information. And then lastly, this will be the real quiz that you can take 2 times. I think this is the real quiz. Maybe you have another practice quiz. This one says it's for 0 points. So I guess you have 2 practice quizzes you can take. This is the real quiz. So you only actually have 1 graded assignment for this week. So make sure that gets done. All right. And then that's the wrap up.